Hi everyone, welcome to our Wildcat webinar. We're sorry for the delay, but I would like to get us started by introducing Nancy Lane.
Sorry everyone, we had some major technical difficulties this morning and we apologize, but I'd like to welcome you to another Wildcat webinar. I'm Nancy Cawley Lane, class of 1987, and I serve on the Villanova University Alumni Association Board of Directors. One of our goals at the Alumni Association this year was to relaunch the Villanova webinar program, and we decided to expand the series to educate, engage, and inspire alumni at all levels of their career, from entry level to CEOs and everyone in between. So we intend to secure the biggest names and brightest minds across multiple disciplines to be speakers for this relaunched webinar series, and we welcome any ideas that you all have for future topics and speakers. Our first webinar premiered last month and featured Dean Patrick Magidi from Villanova School of Business, and he certainly inspired us as he tackled the subject of innovation and why it is needed more than ever in the workplace today. And if you missed that webinar, we have an archived version available that you can watch anytime. So I'm particularly excited about our speaker and topic today. Lutz Finger is the Director of Data Science at LinkedIn, and I think that is such a cool title and one that certainly didn't exist when I graduated. I had the pleasure of meeting Lutz earlier this year during a full day of meetings at LinkedIn, and our group was just really impressed with his approach to measuring data, and many of us also enjoyed reading his book, Ask, Measure, Learn. I highly recommend it for anyone that is interested in this topic. So today, Lutz is going to talk about using social media analytics to understand and influence customer behavior. It's a fascinating topic with something for everyone to learn. We'll take questions at the end, so feel free to type them into the box on the right side of your panel. And for those inclined to tweet about today's webinar, we're using hashtag WildcatWebinar, and Lutz's Twitter name is @LutzFinger. And so now it's my pleasure to turn it over to my new friend, Lutz Finger. Thanks so much for being with us today, Lutz.
Thanks, Nancy, for the kind introduction. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you guys are. Clearly, if you want to tweet me questions after the webinar, I will get back to any of you who tweet to me as long as you use the hashtag. So let's start right in. In the next 45 to 50 minutes, we will go through a couple of things. I want to talk, like, what will you learn? You will learn about big data. I heard that you come from all different kinds of backgrounds, so I want to give you a rundown of why do we have big data and why is it actually a hype and why it's not big data what we really want. We want something else, and we will learn this. We will talk about the Ask, Measure, Learn framework. We will learn where Alta Vista failed. We will measure and realize that there is not such a fancy thing as an influencer, you know, the magic weapon which any marketeer wants to have. We will learn about the good formula for text analytics and what that means if you do a social media strategy. So if you run a social media strategy, then I will give you later on the magic formula. And at the end, if you stay as long, you will get free goodies. So let's go forward here. Today, what we see today is pretty much the philosophy of dataism, right? Everybody talks about it. Dataism in kind of correlation to dadaism, which was this art form. We believe data can do everything. And that's nothing new, right? I mean, we believed at a certain point in time technology can do everything, and then we are struggling, as we did in the beginning of this webinar, where we, like, when technology fails us. And the same thing is true to data. So in today's world, we see those amazing cases, and I brought here two cases up, which are very much outrageously far from what we kind of thought in the beginning would be possible, but we now realize that we actually have data to do so. So the first case is from terrorism. So you see there this world map, and you see like all different kinds of dots and lines. This was done once from Khalif Litaru. And what he did is he looked for where journalists across the world believed that Osama bin Laden is living. So you see every different newspaper is an origin of the line, and then it goes to where that newspaper or that person believes Osama bin Laden is living. And the centerpiece is pretty much where they found him later on. So the crowd wisdom in this case, analyzed through technical methods of you take every word which is said out there, analyze it, and trying to understand what does it tell us, found pretty much the place where he was living. Now, you wouldn't dispatch your troops on it. However, as an idea, take big data, and all those movement, crowd ideas, and so on are possible because you suddenly have all their tools. Now, to pregnancy, which is a lower part, pregnancy, there was a big retail chain out there who wanted to know who is pregnant. And why do people want to know this? Well, if you're pregnant, you start, this is a big event in your life, and whenever there are big events in your life, then you change your habits. So if, as a retailer, you want to get into that moment, exactly that moment when people change their life, like their attitudes, because then they are open for a new shampoo or open for a new teeth brush and so on. So they wanted to know, when now people are pregnant, how did they do this? They you know, you have those loyalty cards and you have baby showers. So if somebody has a loyalty card, we pretty much know whatever he's buying, because that's what he's underwriting. He's giving up all his privacy concerns on his purchase behavior for a couple of silver spoons he could get as a freebie. Now, so that information we get, and then if those people on top of it did a baby shower, then we know when somebody is doing a baby shower, most likely they're expecting a baby. That's a valid hypothesis. So now we have two things. We know the shopping behavior, and we know that this person will get a baby soon. Now, you run the numbers, you do this over large scales of people who have done so, and you get actually a pretty good algorithm to predict pregnancy. And the thing made the news because, in this case, the retailer sent out marketing material to the daughter, and the daughter was underage, and the father saw this and kind of complained big time about it. But then he realized that actually the retailer knew something which he did not know yet. So big data is at the moment what we believe rules. Now let me give you a short definition of big data. People talk about always the V's of big data. It's volume. Big data means it's big, right? That's big data. It's big data means as well there's a variety of data. So the two examples I gave to you are already two completely different data formats. One data format is finding Osama bin Laden, is looking for text, trying to cut down text, trying to identify which cities where is Osama bin Laden mentioned, and so on and so forth. The second part in trying to find pregnancy is actually on, it's a more structured approach, because people who give their loyalty card, I know the number on the loyalty card, that's you the number, and then I know the SKU, so the unit which you bought and how many units you bought from this one. That's structured. So you have structured, you have unstructured. Unstructured is video, unstructured is text, so they're different formats. You have velocity. People talk about real time. It's bullshit. I mean, real time, there's a lot of different real times in this world. A trader in Wall Street will say real time for him is something below nanoseconds, so very, very short time frames. While in most business applications, you say real time, it's good enough, it's 20 minutes or it's next day and so on and so forth. So it's more in time or near time, which is a better way, but there are different velocities the data comes in, right? I mean, like if you think about your browsing behavior, you leave a data trail which comes in constantly to your internet service provider. And you have to deal with this. This is as well part of big data. And then veracity. Veracity is the uncertainty. If you think about a big network, let's take a social network. And in social network, you have a couple of millions of participant in this network. If somebody connects to somebody, that happens on one server structure. It does not mean that all the other servers in real time actually know. Meaning I connect today to Nancy, and I'm as well connected to somebody else maybe, that somebody else not immediately would know because the information, there's an uncertainty in that information. So uncertainty means, like so far, we had very, very clear views on data. We had everything in one structure, sort of say. Now, in the big data range, that's not possible anymore. So we have to live with the fact that at any given point in time, we don't know everything. So there is an uncertainty in the settings, which I'm a former quantum physicist, and I like this concept of things being uncertain. Now, you heard all this, and I kind of said, wow, this is so awesome, this amazing data world we are living today. But then there is the backlash. Because, let's face it, you are sitting in this webinar, but you're too late for the hype. The hype actually is cooling off. Big data is bullshit. That goes through the press already. It started actually with Harper Reid, who was a CTO at Obama for America, who said, big data is bullshit. Well, and everybody was hyping while Obama did his campaign. Oh, he has so much awesome data. He knows what people drink, whether they drink Coke or whether they drink Pepsi. He knows what kind of car they're driving. He knows so much. And there Harper goes and says, bullshit. I don't care. And why is that? Because what he needs to understand is where to dispatch people to. Let's shortly remind, and you will see that when you talk about data, always the background is important, always the domain knowledge, as we call it, is important. Harper sits on a group of volunteers who go around and do either fundraising or trying to persuade voters to vote. Now the question is, where in the states does he dispatch those troops? If he dispatches the troops in an area which is all against Obama, then this is not good for the mood of the troops, as well as for the people who go out there. They don't make a big difference. They can't swing the whole voter district. So he needs to, and if on the other hand, if he puts those people out on the street where everybody is an Obama fan, it doesn't make a difference either. So he needs to find with his data the areas, the streets, to dispatch people where he can make a difference. And you will laugh, that's not big data, that's actually small data. At the end, like the data set is not huge. So for Obama, it's like, I don't need to know whether everybody drinks Pepsi or Coke, or what's the drink of choices. I need to know a very specific thing, and that very specific thing is actually small. So do we want big data? Well, I mean, I'm working at LinkedIn, even when I'm talking today to you as the author of the book Ask, Measure, Learn, but I'm working at LinkedIn. I'm working with big data. But we do not want big data because big data is a pain, and I will make this very easy understandable for each of you. Think about for a moment about your contacts, right? Are they well ordered? Are they well and easy to get to? No, they're not. You most likely, if you are like 89 or like 90% of society, you have a very chaotic way of getting contact information. So you get business cards, you have LinkedIn contacts, you have Facebook contacts, you have Twitter contacts, and you have your old contact area. So it's a mess. Well, it's not big data, it's small data, but this is the problem you're facing. The more data sources you have, the more data you have, the less likely you are to organize them in a suitable way for you to answer your question you have. And you can do the same example with photos, music, and so on and so forth. That's what big data is. It's painful, right? Because you need to have an effort in maintaining it, in sourcing it, and putting it together, and so on and so forth. So what we want is actually, we want a piece of information. We want the photo which we are thinking about. We want the phone number which we kind of want to, from the person we want to call. So we want the information at the right moment. Or Reid Harper wants the street name to dispatch people to. He wants one information. He does not want big data. And nobody cares how you get there. well, that's the problem with my profession. Nobody cares how much work my team is doing and how much we are thinking and how much data crunching we do. What counts is at the end the action. Can I do right or left? So should I buy a company or should I not buy a company? Should I invest in this market or should I not invest in this market? So what we want is we want to answer something in a yes or no fashion. And so we want insights. Now, how do we get there? And very often I get asked, what are data scientists doing? And there are loads of answers to it, and I won't bore you about how to set up a data science team or how to train them. I rather want to tell you in a one sentence what a data scientist is supposed. Make big to small. That's all the job he has. Take big data, or whatever data size he has in hand, and make it actionable and small. And there's a nice article at Mashable where we helped a journalist to find his future self. We did this from LinkedIn. So at LinkedIn we have, actually this number is old, at that time it was 300 plus million members. Today we are already at 350 million plus members. And you went to Villanova. You went to a good school. You went, have done certain things in your life. These are your assets. They kind of show a certain interest. They show a certain capability. They show a certain skill. Now the question is, with those assets, what could you become later on, like in a couple of years? And as much as you believe that you're an individual, a lot of people went to Villanova. A lot of people have similar assets, and so on and so forth. So what we did is we look at all the members which we are having at LinkedIn and trying to find out who has a similar skill set as you do, and what does it mean for the job you might have in the future. So we did this for this guy you see there as a picture. His name is Kurt, and Kurt asked us, so what can I do in 5 years' time? Now, it's very difficult for him because he's a journalist, and journalists never stick at their job. Actually, they have a high volatility. However, we went down. We have big data. We have 300 million members at LinkedIn. We cut it down. We have 60,000 which have a similar job title. Then we cut it down again to 19,000 who switch after 3 to 8 years. Then we cut it down, and then we end up with people who have a similar asset, similar aspiration, and so 24. And from those we selected 3 and showed it to him, and he was totally excited and wrote this article about it. That's very much a simple way of describing what a data scientist does. Go from big to small, but make it please in an automated fashion. But why is all this discussion there about big data is bullshit? Because early on I talked about the 5 V's of big data. It's like the 4 V's of big data. It's actually, in my book, I introduce a 5th V, and very often I hear this in different forms. There is a 5th, there has to be value. And value is, for me, the 5th V. So the big data thing, as I said, it's painful. But you do this because you want to get to the value. Now, I very often talk to boards of bigger companies, and they come to me and say, we want to invest in big data. And why do they say so? Because an armada of salespeople came to them and told them about infrastructure, databases, analytics systems, and so on and so forth. But that's not what you want. You want insights. So be very, very careful if you're thinking about it. How do you generate value out of it? And there's loads to generate, but get this idea first. And that's the reason why I called my book Ask, Measure, Learn. What happens very, very often in this society is that people have to, because they have the technology that measure, they do measure. And then they run around and think about, like, oh, what could have been the ask and what can I potentially learn from it? So Ask, Measure, Learn is a very simple concept. I developed this before LinkedIn. I built my own company, which I sold in last year. And that company supported with media analytics and data analytics NGOs like the World Economic Forum or the Olympic Games or the FIFA or the OECD, as well as a couple of governments. Here is the same approach. We first need to figure out what the government actually wants, or the NGO. And then we built the measurement and the tool system around it, and then we helped them to act on it. So that framework I developed together with the Dean of Cornell University, who is as well my co-author of the book. And you might now scratch your head and say, hold on, one framework for all of those big data questions? That seems to me a little bit like too much. Well, actually, the framework stays the same. But what you need to do is obviously to adapt it to the different areas. So in the book, I actually go through the following areas, marketing down to products, and I'm looking at different areas how you can use data. Now, be aware, everybody has slightly different data, which is the whole fun of it. And you will see the industry changing enormously. There are industries which you believe are dead or which you believe are just trading commodities, but these industries today realize that they sit on data which nobody else has. And because they sit on data which nobody else has, they can create new services, being disruptive, and do things which you did not believe are possible. As, for example, they help you to figure out that your daughter is pregnant. I mean, obviously that's not a productizable thing to do, but from that magnitude. Industries will change because they own data. Now, if you write a book, it's very difficult to actually talk about data which people might possess. So in the book, I'm very much focusing on social media, and I'm breaking down how social media can be used for all of those things. So if you're in social media, the book is worthwhile, but if you're into data, it's a good primer to understand how to use it. Now, we won't have time to go through all of those, but I will give you a couple of ideas. So let's start with the ask. And I give you a typical ask for products. And ask is actually the hardest part. And it's like people are always surprised, but it is not the data, it's not the crunching and the munching. We have loads of information there. The ask, the business-driven part, is the biggest problem. You don't want to just come up with information which is intellectually interesting but doesn't do anything for your business model. So let's look at product. And I give you the reason for a wrong ask. I promised you that I show you why Alta Vista failed, and here it is. It's a wrong ask. Do you recall what Alta Vista's claim to fame was? I mean, they were the biggest search engine whatsoever. Like, they were the shining star of the new economy. And they pride themselves with the following ask. We, as Alta Vista, know every potential website out there, or at least we know way more than any of our competitors. So we have a complete idea, or nobody really knows all the websites, but the most complete idea of anybody out there. This is the ask they kind of like try to solve. And it makes sense because when we think about libraries, like obviously a library which has more books in it is better than a library which does not have books in it. So that was the ask they went to. Now look at this. It took from 2005 to 2001, so a little bit over a year, to completely take Alta Vista down from 20% market share down to 7. And we know how the story continued. This is Google. And why is that? Google had a different ask, had a better metrics, had a different ask. Google's ask was not, because they could not compete. They were sitting in a garage, small on cash, small on abilities, not abilities, but work team and servers. They could not compete with the ask which Alta Vista put out there. They competed on a different ask. They said, well, we don't need to know all the websites in the world as long as we know the right one. Now again, let's go back to the library example. I don't care if the library has millions of books, but I do care if the librarian kind of looks at me and said, like, you need that variant book, and it's right? I mean, this is the convenience. That's the reason that Google pretty much took it over. And if you look at this number, I actually understand why Google so strongly looks out for diversification in the market, because they know if somebody comes with a better ask, they might be out of business in a very short time, as it happened to Alta Vista. as it will happen to any industry out there. I very often have those discussions where people say, well, we have a good business today, but what if somebody else finds a better way of solving it or a different way? And in today's data world, this is actually an open game. We are entering into something which I would say, business-wise, is very much a wild, wild west. Everything goes. Let's go to the measurement. Because, as I said, the ask is difficult, and you can see this with Alta Vista, right? I mean, they weren't stupid. They had a lot of smart people on the team, but still they didn't get the ask right. So the ask is a tough one. But once you have formulated the ask, obviously you need the data to support it, which I'm kind of saying measure the right data. As you saw in Harper Reed's example, it does not need to be big data. It just needs to be the data supporting you. Now, let me go into marketing. Marketing can be split in branding or intention creation. Let's go to the intention creation. I promised you that I will talk about the influencer. The influencer in the marketing world is a unicorn, right? I mean, we know that marketeers don't like salespeople because they can't really sell. And we know that salespeople don't like marketeers because if they would just make the product look better, then they could sell. So there is always this tension. But then everybody hopes for this unicorn influencer. The influencer is somebody who goes and endorses your product, and because he endorses the product, or he or she, everybody is now going and buying it. This idea is around since 1955. And it was called by Katz and Lazar, it was called opinion leaders. And if you have read The Tipping Point, then Gladwell in 2000 called it the law of the few, which is a little bit more easier to read than the original paper from Katz and Lazar, but 45 years later. So the whole idea here is a few people make us buy, do things, and determine everything we do. So if I'm a good marketeer, I should not spend money for TV and advertisements. I should just spend money to find this person. And in the social media frame, suddenly we had loads of data and kind of thought, oh, this is cool. Now it's very easy to find this person, and we just need to address it. And like you see Cloud, for example, doing perk programs and so on and so forth, to saying if somebody is really important, give him a couple of things and then he will endorse it, and that will go a long way. Now, if you ask marketers today, they will say, I don't know, it didn't really work. And the question is why? Because we use wrong data sets. The first question to ask is, do we have actually scientific proof that this influencer exists? And the answer is not really. So there have been a lot of studies since 1955. That's a long time. And the study which I kind of think is the best is from Kevin Louisa, and what they did is they looked for 4 years at 1,001 students. They looked on Facebook, they did self-reported data, they asked them questionnaires, and they tried to figure out, it was a college setting, they tried to figure out from getting into college till leaving this college, those college students, who influences who. I mean, everything is right in this setting, right? Because at that age time, people are, like that's what marketeers say, easily to influence, and they looked for only, like for a lot of emotional things. They looked for books, they looked for movies, they looked for films, and so on and so forth. And what they found is no statistical evidence that anybody influences anybody. That's scary, isn't it? Because we all know this from our personal experience. I just came to the US like a little bit over a year ago, and I know that obviously I ask people to like, where can I send my kids to school? Where can I find a dentist? Which car should I buy? And all of those things. So it seems to be that I'm influenced in like that people can influence me. And we know this as well, like advertisement does have an effect. So what am I telling you that there is no influencer? Well, let's say it's slightly less ambitious. Influence is very often overstated, and the idea of a single person being an influencer does not exist. So what do we see here in this graph is you see here actually the correlation, like for the different areas, whether influence existed or not, the star behind the bar means it's statistical relevant, you know, like 1 star, 2 star, 3 star. So it's a very slightly statistical relevancy here. And these are the only 2 he found. Classical music and jazz, yes, people influence each other. And there is a reason to it, because if you are a classic fan or jazz fan, you know it's very difficult to find a certain recording which is awesome. So the discussion goes, oh, well, I listened to this one and you know what, very awesome recording, you should get it. And that's an influence. Now, independent music, it's actually anti-correlated, so there is no influence, meaning if I listen to a certain independent composer, my friend will make sure that he lets me being independent, and he is not listening to it, which were the only 2 things where we found influence areas. The rest is actually very often what we call homophilia, as people tend to do what they already like to do. So I'm listening to a certain music group, and I'm going to meet people who are listening to the same taste, similar taste. So I don't get influenced by them directly. I'm more like I'm regrouping myself with them. So influence as such is overestimated. It is more coming down to the right metrics, and here we are with the metrics idea, reach, readiness, and topic dependence. I will talk about reach a little bit in a second, but the whole point is, now you wonder, hold on, this guy wants to tell us something about data. Now he gave us a whole background about why an influencer does not exist. Well, it's actually important, not only if you work in social media and looking for the influencer, but also if you work in data, because the understanding is first you need to understand a little bit the background. You need to acquire domain knowledge before you actually can start working in data effectively, because otherwise you just, with brute force, it seldom works if you do not have a very defined problem. If you have a defined problem, then the person who defined it had the domain knowledge. All right, so reach, readiness, topic dependent. Reach, we will talk in a sec. Readiness means there is a certain time of the year that you buy Christmas trees, and like that you are happy to be influenced which size of a tree is good. And topic dependence is obviously the same thing, like not the same thing, but like it's around topic. You will believe certain things, you will go for certain things, and for others you don't. Now reach. Do you know Aja Dior? Well, if you're on social media, you should know her, because she became famous by the very sad fact that she tweeted the following thing: oh my God, Auntie Tiffany, who works for Whitney Houston, just found Whitney Houston dead in the tub. Such a shame and sad. She tweeted that, and as you can see below here, which is an analysis which Gilad Lotan did, Ajar is the point which I circled, and then I show you whoever retweeted her is directly connected with her. So Hershey Kisses, for example, retweeted her, and then somebody else, Forever Charme, retweeted her, and so on and so forth. So you can see pretty much, and the color means it was before it was official, because the Aja tweeted this 45 minutes before the official news was released. So that information, you can see she touched, I think, at 11 bubbles you see here next to her, who actually knew about this through her before the official news was released. Now, definitely topic dependence, like, definitely exists, right? I mean, this is an incredible piece of news, sad news, but it's an incredible piece of news. Timing definitely is clear. Now, why this still information didn't make it through? Because the internet is not equal. This is what happens after AP News released it. And Ajar is on this picture not even visible. So AP News released it and everybody picks it up. Why? Because AP News has reach. But AP News is not an influencer, right? They only have the ability to relay information, to transport information. So be very, very careful when you talk about influencing thing. It's more the measure you want to use is reach. Then if we talk about the topic dependencies, then it's where text analytics comes in. And text analytics is just the way, I mean, text analytics means you work with data, with text data, trying to cut it down. And there are loads of different ways of doing this. Again, you take some piece of information and you create data out of it on top of that in order to make this text easier to understand. So text analytics is could be, for example, emotionality. There's a study done by Jona Berger. He analyzed what makes an article get to the New York, I think it was a New York Times email list, and he analyzed it by text. So the more anger or the more awe an article had, the more likely it is to get on the New York Times email list, distribution list, as a news. If it's a sad article, it's not likely to spread. Now that is true for the readership of the New York Times. There might be other groups who actually value very highly anxiety, and then for them becomes contagious, or viral. Like viral is a wrong word. It's often used, but it's actually contagious. Contagious in that setting. So it depends again very much on who you're looking for. Again, the idea is one influencer doesn't exist, is depending on the groups. Now, and then we obviously have trending content. Trending content is something, for example, here we did a study for somebody, and this is now with LinkedIn data, where we look at followers and look what in those followers is actually trending. And there are certain things which trend, which allow then this person to work exactly towards the aim of their followers, right? So if you think about influence, forget it, it's more reach. However, reach as well as the likelihood for information to spread depends on different things, and text mining is one of the big metrics to use. So what does it mean? We said in the beginning, the ask is the hardest part, then the data. To get the data, you have to have domain knowledge, and then what you do actually is you create a lot of what we call features, variables, or whatever, like a lot of additional analytics, which we then use in order to build our models. Okay, now we covered the ask, we covered the measure part, and now let's go back and let's do the learn part. And for the learn part, I promised you the magic formula. If we looking for social media content generation, because once you did it, once you looked at reach generation, once you looked at text mining and so on, you can build your own model and saying what's actually good for if you work with social media. Again, the learn part obviously might be totally different for somebody who works in the Internet of Things, or totally different if you look at network propagation, or totally different if you think for Industry 4.0. I'm using in this case content, and I explained the content piece in terms of the measurement, gave you the background. Now obviously the learn piece, I focus on content as well. So what's the magic formula? You have to have reach, you have to have frequency, and you have to have content. Reach, frequency, content. Reach, we saw AP News, AJ Dior was not the right person to spread the information. Content, we saw there are certain pieces of content which fit more your audience. There are certain pieces of content which engages more your audience, and so on and so forth. And frequency, clearly, the more often you do this, the better it is. And what do you get? Now that's a big question, because one of the questions is, what do you measure in terms of what's your success rate? Well, you get engagement. Engagement, now, engagement is the latest and greatest. I'm not sure whether it's the only one and how long it will stay, but we started off with clicks. We realized clicks is bad because you can have bots doing those clicks. It's hard to measure, and so on and so forth. And then after clicks and views, we actually moved over to engagement. Engagement, people like it, share it, comment on it, and so on and so forth. Now, be aware, not all engagement is equal. What you see here is a study where they actually look on the likelihood to tweet on a given article. And so the likelihood to tweet, so what you see on the horizontal axis, it's the attention span in percentage, meaning how much of the article have you actually read. So you see there is this 100, I hope everybody can read it. 100 is very much to the end on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, you have actually the likelihood to share it via Twitter or via any sharing button. And what you see here is actually in the beginning, before people have read it, the article actually, the likelihood is almost highest. So people see the article and tweet it right away. And then once they start reading it, actually the likelihood to tweet gets down and down and down. And only once they have read 100% and now still are on the article, scrolling back and forth or reading through the comments, only then they become more, again, likely to share it again. So if you're a brand, you need to figure out which of those proportions you want to have. Do you want to have the people who share directly, or do you want to have the people who are sharing after they read the whole article? Depends very much, right? If you want to reach creation, you don't care. As long as they share, you don't care. If you want a brand building, creating brand awareness, well, you would like to see that the people actually read the article. That's all nothing new if you come from a marketing area, because you know that in marketing we already have, like, if you think about TV spots, those shocking TV spots might be very, very interesting. Everybody talks about it. But if people can't recall the brand, it was actually not a good one. Here you have the same thing, only that it comes down to the headline. If people are totally excited about the headline but don't care about reading the article, they might create reach, but they might not create a sticky effect for the brand. Now, a lot more to say. If you like, either you look into the book, or what I created is I created a paper on content curation, and you can find this on my website, lutzfinger.com. You go over to resources, and there you can actually download a white paper on content curation and how do we measure it, which pretty much gives you a lot of those ideas in as you see. Now the next one is the other part of it, when we go away from this specific content creation, is more generically, what can you do in that learn area? And I get it often, like my team here is, we are looking for data products. We're trying to build data stuff. Now, what is the data product? And a data product can be pretty much cut into 3 different parts. It can be benchmarking, it can be recommendations and filters, and it can be predictions. So those 3 areas you have. And I will give you a short rundown of all 3 of them. But be aware, any data product is only useful if it creates an action. Data by itself is useless. Information is useless. It only becomes useful if you create an action, right? If I tell you that in today's podcast there are, somebody told me it's about 300 people, so in today's podcast there are 300 people, that's for you information. 300 is a piece of information, but it's totally useless, right? If I tell you that out of those 300, 2 have actually business for you, and the names of the following people are like those, then it becomes useful. So only if actions go. So if I tell you use a hashtag and ask for who has business for me, then you have even an action you can do. You can either tweet who has business for me with a hashtag, or you cannot tweet, and the action counts. Benchmark. We all know benchmark is a basic data product. If you want to make yourself a name in a company on data in the data world, the best thing you start with is benchmarking. We all know this, who is bigger than whom. If you have a kid, he will learn benchmarking very early on, and from then on, like, what is the fastest rocket, which one is faster, and so on and so forth. benchmarking for companies goes easy. What you see here is actually a study which I did with my old company on insurance companies and how they're mentioned in public in newspapers. And you can see the blue one as the insurance company we worked for, and we tell them what we call it's a share of voice. How much are the different papers mentioning them versus the competitors and how often? The problem with benchmark is, so what? So you see this, it's a colorful chart, nicely done, thank you, but what is the action? The actionability only works once you work with a person, meaning you need an analyst. So benchmark products need an analyst who tell you, actually, if you look at the Forbes newspaper from below, it's independent, the blue bar is very short there, meaning the coverage is very short. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? If you're coming from a commerce background, you will know that sometimes you just don't want to be covered. So it could be a good thing. Or you say, damn, like all my competitors, Norwich, for example, is covered very strongly. I have to get in there. So the action comes, in this case, in benchmarking products, through the analyst who understands the graph and tells them what to do. Now, recommendation. Recommendation is which made the hype in the whole world of the internet, in the whole data world, because recommendation pretty much cuts out the analyst and lets it up to you as the user to do an action or not to do an action. And in LinkedIn, we do, there's a lot of recommendation products, very, very good ones around. People you may know, it's a typical recommendation product. We look at your network, we look at do your connections know people you may know as well, and then we show it to you and say, like, we recommend you that you link to this person because you might know him. Have a chat. There is no analyst needed anymore. It's you, right? Groups you may like, similar ads you may be interested in. We don't show you any ad. We show you ads where we believe it fits your skills, your profession, and so on and so forth. Companies you want to follow, similar profiles. Pulse is our news feed, so that you get only newspaper articles which fit your profession, which should be of interest for you because people with a similar background like you actually are reading those articles. So benchmarking, that's the recommendation products. If you want to read more of it, I recently published a couple of Forbes articles. You find myself on Forbes, where you find a few videos on recommendation articles. Have a look there. Well, the third one is prediction. Prediction is actually different from recommendation because in recommendation you get several for a selection. Yeah? Right? If you go to Google, they recommend your website is to click on when you search for a certain search term, but they give you 20 to select from. Prediction is very similar in technology terms of wise, but it has to have one single thing, meaning from benchmark to recommendation, we cut out the analyst. From recommendation to prediction, we cut out you. There's no need for you to decide. So predicting Oscars means I cannot say, oh, I give you a selection of a few Oscars. No, I need to say that Oscar will win. So The Wolf of Wall Street will win with 23.63%, has a highest likelihood to win. Well, we all know that The Wolf of Wall Street was a good movie, but it did not win. It was 12 Years of a Slave, 13.51. Now, why is that? The people who did this study actually based it all on Twitter, and Twitter is a very bad measurement to use. Now, the ask these guys had was correct, right? I want to know who wins the Oscar. You can bet on it. It has implication in terms of your merchandise and so on and so forth. But the measure that they used was wrong. They used Twitter. If you look at how the Academy, the guys who actually give out the award, work, they might not be on Twitter. So what you would need in order to predict this correctly, what you would need to look into it, you can look at all moviegoers. That's box office results, but not Twitter because not everybody is on Twitter. You could look at highly engaged moviegoers. That's people who write on Rotten Tomato or the IMDb. You could look at industry professionals. That's people who write in public blogs or publications, official ones. you could look at the industry professionals, or you could look at what the people of the academy says. Now, they used only Twitter. That's the reason why they got it wrong. So the right ask, but the wrong data doesn't get you to a result either, at least nothing actionable. There are more examples, and you see loads of industries switching, going from knowing data to actually or having data, which makes them novel, to creating new services, new products as we speak. It's an amazing time. As I said, I actually would claim that the change which we see for society for us is bigger than the change we saw with the internet. The internet was one thing, you're connected or not, and everybody got excited, and it changed big time the way we shop, we search, we mail, we communicate. But it didn't do anything new. We always could search, shop, and communicate. Now, data will allow us to do a lot of things which we have not thought about it before. Amazing times. So you got it. It's ask, it's measure, it's learn. And I promised we are now at the end. I promised you a few goodies. So you can get a free chapter on marketing if you want. You will find some of the concepts I discussed here. Go to lutzfinger.com resources. You will need to sign up for my newsletter, but once I write you something, you can always unsign again. You get a free marketing chapter. You can get the free content curation paper. There's as well a paper on measurements, as well as all the references to this webcast. And with this one, we spent now roughly 50 minutes. I would hand over back to the webcast if you guys had questions and so on. If something was in the Twitter stream, let me know, and I will answer you whatever you need to know. Okay, I read you one. What are some optimal ways to use social media analytics as a springboard for writing assignments in an undergrad course of business communication? Okay, so very often I hear social media used as an ideation process. There was a camera manufacturer who kind of created this camera, and then they said, oh, and we looked at social media, and because people talked about that this is an awesome camera, but they would love to take it on a ski trip, we made this rugged version of the same camera, which is high-tech, but you actually can take it and can drop it into snow and can take it to your ski trip. I obviously have no ability to validate this story, but I would be very, very careful that this is true. I would assume it's more a hype thing and part of the communication strategy. Because what happens very often, if you think about a new camera gets out, there's a lot of discussion of, and I actually, for this very camera, I did the study, I looked at all the tweets, which we found a lot of people would say that they did with this camera this amazing shot, or they would say, with my new so-and-so, I did this shot and here, and so they post pictures. In that enormous amount of data, maybe one or two people said something about a ski trip and that they would have loved to take the camera with it. But it's very unlikely for somebody to find that piece of information because there is so much noise in the data. Now, you can use social media for ideation, but that means very much you need to read most of it, because that's the only way how you get ideation. If you want to use analytics, you need to know, that's the domain knowledge discussion which I had in the beginning, you need to know what you're looking for. So you need to say, I want to know how many people say, I want to use a camera in the ski resort, or how many people use terms like too easy to break, and so on and so forth. So you need to have a hypothesis, which you then can ask towards it. Meaning, if you want to use social media analytics for a springboard, for whatever reason, be it a course, be it business communication, be it product development, you have to have a knowledge about what you're looking for. And that, most of the times, once you have that knowledge, there are more effective ways of answering the specific question than social media analytics. What you can do, obviously, is you use ways like word clouds or identity recognitions and so on. So you cut the word data, and then you get loads of things, and then you need to look at it and kind of trying to understand what's happening there. We helped one big global sports organization. I don't want to say the name in my old time with my company and my old company, and we would have a manual process of doing so. Now they would have millions of articles and tweets, and then we kind of like use a funnel to aggregate, and then suddenly this underage girl came up. And the sport did not have anything to do with underage girls. So somebody then needs to look into it, read it, and say, oh, okay, that's a reason. And in this case, it was actually something that an underage girl did something which tried to participate into one sport, which they should have not done this. And that made the news. Now, that's a way to get ideas, but it will essentially come down to read. The more prominent the idea is, the easier it is to find. And there's this tricky overlap. If it's a prominent idea, you probably know it by yourself already. If it's a non-prominent idea, you will need to do a lot of reading till you find it. And that's the reason why I'm hesitating that the camera manufacturer actually found the idea of the rugged camera by listening into the stream. Are there any other questions?
I think we're out of time, and I want to thank you so much for a terrific webinar today. Really great information. Everyone will be getting a link to the archived version of this in the next day or so, and you'll also be receiving a survey in the next few minutes. It's just a really quick survey, and we'd love to get your feedback. I want to let you know that our next Wildcat webinar will feature Tu Lushkri, the director of the Villanova Ice Center, and this is going to take place on February 18th. And on behalf of the Alumni Association Board, I'd also like to invite you to get more involved with Villanova, and if you're interested in volunteering in any way, we would love to hear from you. You could contact me or Amy Lehman, who's on this call, amy.lehman@villanova.edu, or send the email to the Alumni Association, and we would be happy to talk. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Sorry again for the technical issues. We'll get them resolved for next time. And Lutz, thanks again. Really wonderful webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.